U.S. Farmers and Ranchers in Action would like to recognize the sponsors of the 2020 Honor the Harvest Forum. Welcome to the U.S. Farmers and Ranchers in Action weekly video podcast for Wednesday, September 2nd, 2020. I'm your host, Phil Limpert. Today, it's all about the future of food and agriculture. Our guests are Ramsay Huntley and Andy Fabin. Ramsay is the Sustainable Finance Strategist for Wells Fargo, a member of the Sustainability and Corporate Responsibility Leadership Team. He oversees the development and execution of Wells Fargo's Sustainable Finance Strategy. He works with business partners across the bank to develop new opportunities that support Wells Fargo's $200 billion sustainable finance commitment and position the bank to lead the transition to a low-carbon economy. He also has the responsibility for the bank's clean tech philanthropy programs, including the award-winning Wells Fargo Innovation Incubator in conjunction with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. Andy is part of the multi-generational family-owned and operated Fabin Brothers Farms in Indiana, Pennsylvania. Fabin Brothers Farms specializes in soybean processing, crop production, cow-calf operations, as well as commodity buying and marketing. He's a member of the Bedford Farm Bureau Co-op's Board of Directors, the Pennsylvania Soybean Board, the Pennsylvania Cattlemen's Association, the Beef Quality Assurance, Pennsylvania Beef Council, Indiana County Farm Bureau, and Pennsylvania Farm Bureau's Young Farmer and Rancher Committee. Andy and Ramsay, welcome to Farm Food Facts.
Thanks, Phil. Great to be here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
The topic is how the Transformative Investment Project can impact the future of food and agriculture. Ramsay, let's get started and give us the definition. What exactly is the Transformative Investment Project?
Sure. Well, certainly, speaking on behalf of myself and Wells Fargo, we were excited to participate in the Transformative Investment Project. And what it's focused on is what does it take to drive forward the next decade of investment into the agricultural community here in the United States, with a particular focus on how do we think about solutions that can support climate smart agriculture. And I think what's really exciting about what we're trying to do with the Transformative Investment Project is to really bring a lot of different partners like Andy and many others to the table to really think about what some solutions here could be. And I think it's a unique opportunity given that finance, like myself, farmers, and lots of other participants throughout the whole ag value chain are at the table here with us. So really excited to be part of it.
So, Andy, we've heard from a lot of farmers, even pre-COVID-19, that they've been struggling financially, that it's been tough. The past couple of seasons just hasn't given the crop yields that people have hoped for. What are you finding in Pennsylvania?
Well, like you said, it's been a rough go here, especially since COVID hit. But we've been looking at, this is probably our third year of, subprime crops. The last 2 years we were exceptionally wet. And this year we were dealt a pretty hard blow when it came to drought as well. So the month of August, our first rain was 3 days ago. So that's pretty dry for Pennsylvania. A lot of failed crops here in Pennsylvania. Everybody is really worried about, making enough feed to get through to next harvest for their dairy herds, and there's just a lot of worry right now. And then you throw that on top of global food prices and global trade issues that we've been seeing. It just compounds the problems.
So, Ramsay, the Transformative Investment Project is a big project over many years. What are you doing? What is Wells Fargo doing to help folks, farmers like Andy today, to get through these kinds of issues? And it's great for us to talk about, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, that, climate change is going to be eradicated and everything we're going to do. But these guys and gals are struggling right now. How can this project help them?
Sure. Well, when we gather with the, many constituents at the table, one of the things that we're talking about are, what are solutions that can bring additional economic benefit onto the farm. We've heard loud and clear from our farmer and rancher partners that they're looking for additional economic incentives. And I think Andy's description of what you just heard there, along with what we've heard from other producers and operators in the field, that's very consistent that there's a need today. And so one of the opportunities that is under consideration through the Transformative Investment Project is how can farmers and ranchers be compensated for additional benefits that they're bringing through their stewardship of their land. For instance, there's been quite a bit of conversation around the carbon credit markets. What are the ecosystem services that farmers and ranchers are, they're producing today, but may not be valued accordingly in the market? And so I think that's one of the areas that's quite interesting for consideration here. An area where we and I think other corporations have seen rapid uptake, frankly, even just in the last few months or year or two here, where there's been a lot of interest in how do we better compensate our agricultural community for those benefits that we're all ultimately going to enjoy. So that's just one example that's potentially out there.
So, Andy, you talk about the global markets. What is the state of the global markets right now?
We're seeing improvements. I guess I'm not a global economist, but I'm hearing some positive signs from our trade partners around the world, and we've been working on this issue for the last, let's call it 2 years, of developing new markets with countries that we haven't done a lot of trade with in the past, but they are shaping up to be good trade partners. And I think that going forward, we will have, made some inroads around the world so that we're not so reliant on the 800-pound gorillas.
And Ramsay, what are you seeing globally?
Certainly, I would say, my experience tracks with what Andy, just described as well. And, I think we're, paying attention to certainly the issues that Andy was talking about earlier. There are clearly significant weather-related issues this year. I think we've all seen the news of late of the derecho in Iowa, for instance. But certainly Andy, mentions the issue, lack of rain even in his area. So I think that is front and center in our own consideration here, as well as what are the implications related to weather this year, and frankly, what are the implications for that as we continue forward, where it certainly seems like the sense of normal, if you will, perhaps is a little less within the bands of normalcy that we perhaps been used to in the past.
So, Andy, obviously you're very active in Pennsylvania agriculture. What we've seen during the pandemic is a lot of retailers, a lot of supermarkets actually reaching out directly to farmers and to ranchers to secure a source of supply. I mean, for the first time in our lives, we walked into supermarkets and we saw empty shelves, and that has freaked out a lot of people, a lot of consumers, especially in the meat case. So what are you seeing with that relationship? Are we going to see, supermarkets working much more locally than we've ever seen before?
I think so. The American public has been just so, I guess myself included, we just take everything for granted. But the complexity of our food system and our supply chain has been exposed to the public. It's very complex. There are a lot of moving parts. You just go out to lunch and get a cheeseburger, and there are dozens of companies involved in a simple cheeseburger, from the meat and cheese to the bread, the potatoes for the fries, the ketchup, everything. So I think that has been brought to light to the American consumer. Like you'd mentioned, this is the first time that has been, their confidence has been shaken. Not to any one person's fault, but when something like this occurs, we weren't ready. We weren't prepared. And, that when you can skip a few steps in that supply chain, I think it simplifies the process, and people have a lot more access to their food and feel a little more secure with it.
I interviewed a farmer, I believe it's a husband and wife, I want to say in North Dakota, and they also have cattle. And what we're seeing is they had to drive the cows, 4 or 5 hours to have them slaughtered, and they had to make an appointment, months ahead in order to do that. Are you seeing that in Pennsylvania as well?
Yeah, I've heard of stories like that. Yes, we have not seen that here locally, because Pennsylvania, we've been blessed for decades with literally dozens and dozens of small packers. We're not as reliant on the large packing companies here in Pennsylvania. But yes, that is certainly been highlighted here locally as well.
So it looks like Pennsylvania is the right model for the future, because now
It very well could be.
yeah, because now we're just seeing that a lot of these meat packing plants are still 20, 30, 40% capacity. They're talking about having to make, huge investments, going to folks like Ramsay and begging for money because they've got to go either all robotic or they've got a distance, and, their factories were built to do as much as they can, as cheap as they can. And that model, to your point, just hasn't really worked. And, for consumers to be exposed to this, in a way, I would argue that it's a good thing that they understand how complicated it is. On the other hand, I would say it might be a bad thing because now they're looking at it and saying, whoa, the way I'm getting that cheeseburger just is way too complicated. What do you think, Ramsay?
Well, Phil, to tie that back to the transformative investment work, one of the things that's really important to this work is the data that underpins not just any one farm, what's happening in one community, but really across that whole value chain. And so when we think about transformative investment, we're thinking about the technologies that can ultimately tell that consumer more about the product they're consuming. But I think the intermediate point that is perhaps more salient to the farm community is how can we use that additional information, as I said earlier, such that Andy and other farmers can ultimately accrue additional economic benefit. So if we know more about what's happening in that system, the benefits that are associated with that, not only can we potentially find a way to add value, at the farm, there's also value add for the consumer there because that information is valuable to say, here's how your cheeseburger, your wheat, whatever the product might be, was produced, and here's the benefits that were associated with that perhaps you weren't aware of otherwise. But now, thanks to a project like this, we have information that helps to bring those stories to life. And I think when we think about what's happening in the CPG space, that idea of bringing stories to life is incredibly important to that conversation.
So, Ramsay, if you have to look in your crystal ball 5 years from now, what does agriculture look like?
If I had a crystal ball that was really that good, I'd probably have a different career, maybe directly on Wall Street, right? But I think, if we think about what the future holds, that idea of more information rather than less is absolutely the trajectory that we're on. That was true this time last year. I think if you reflect on what we saw this year, on the supermarket aisle, throughout the value chain, that will continue to be the case. And I think what you're also going to see is a significant increase in a trend that's underway now, which is the commitment to sustainability with the large food and bev companies. And if you follow that thread backwards, through the value chain, I think that has some real positive benefits. And that's where a project like the transformative investment work can be, I think, ultimately really valuable, not just to the farm community, but really to all of us.
So, Andy, look in your crystal ball 5 years. What does it look like?
Well, I was hoping you weren't going to ask that. I thought that was a great question. So, yeah, I think we're going to keep forging ahead with, the American farmer has always worked towards becoming more and more sustainable. And this is, it's not going to change that fundamentally. We're going to keep doing what we can to be the most sustainable, you know, producers that we know how to be, and we're going to learn every year how to be better. So I think we're just going to keep on keeping on as producers. Hopefully, you know, with the awareness from the American consumer, we can just be more, I guess, transparent about how we do things. You know, it just seems like we've never really had many questions about, you know, our practices in the past, maybe from the vocal minority, if you will. But I think that the minority is going to be the majority now. So I think, you know, I'm very optimistic about agriculture. I think to be a farmer, you've got to be an eternal optimist. You know, I think we're just going to keep on keeping on, and, you know, keep learning every year. We get better.
So, Andy, how do you feel about consumers asking more questions and demanding answers?
I'm actually, you know, couldn't be prouder, really, because we always have a good answer for why we do the things we do. You know, our practices are backed by science and history both. So, you know, I'm not afraid of questions.
And, you know, just to wrap up, and I'm going to ask you both the same question, so you'll get a heads up, but I'm going to start with Andy. Andy, what do you want from Ramsay? What do you want him to do for agriculture and for you?
You know, probably this is just thinking personally, because I am a young farmer. You know, we're working in today, but we're also working for tomorrow in agriculture. You know, this is not a short-term business that we're in. We don't pop in and pop out to make a quick buck. My grandfather farmed this land. My father farmed it. Someday I hope my children and grandchildren farm it. And, you know, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for, you know, investment in capital for the long term. I'm looking for a partner that is willing to grow with me as a businessman.
And Ramsay, what do you want from Andy?
Well, I'd pick up on Andy's point there, and really, I think, build on exactly what he's saying. So Wells Fargo now has been around going on nearly 200 years. And that legacy and that commitment is built on long-term, high-value relationships. So when I think about the sort of relationships that we have with farmers like Andy, I think the more that we can do to understand where their needs are and the information that they need from us, and vice versa, that helps both of us to make better decisions. And I think we have a real opportunity here to work with leaders like Andy to then take that out to the market. So I think what I need from him is for him to continue to raise his voice on what's working for them, and let us help to amplify that from where we sit and bring that out to farmers, producers, and really throughout the entire value chain. And ultimately, like I said, let's tell that story even more positively and shine as bright a light on that as we can. So I think the partnership here is fundamental to moving us forward.
Well, I want to thank both of you for joining us today. You're both optimistic. You're both great. Keep up the good work. And, you know, Andy, I'm going to pray for good weather for you guys, you know, no matter where the farm is in the world.
That's right. That's one thing we can't control.
No, we can't. Thanks for joining us today on Farm Food Facts.
Thank you, Phil.
U.S. Farmers and Ranchers in Action would like to recognize the sponsors of the 2020 Honor the Harvest Forum. Our movement sponsors, United Soybean Board and National Park Board. Our presenting sponsors, Wells Fargo and Cargill. Our gold sponsors, Bayer, Dairy West, Nebraska Soybean Board, McDonald's, Nutrien, and the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research. Our bronze sponsors, Purina and Ernst & Young. Our youth sponsor, Ruan, and our donor sponsor, Tyson. For more information on all things food and agriculture, please visit us at usfarmersandranchers.org also be sure to look out for us on Facebook at U.S. Farmers and Ranchers and on Twitter at USFRA. Until next time.